thank you to all of you who've joined us this afternoon, evening, wherever you might be, on the phone or on Zoom. My name is Adam Seif. I'm a Columbia College alum from the class of 2011. So this is technically my virtual 10-year reunion. And I've been stunned all week thinking about that it's been 10 years since I graduated college. It does not feel like it's been that much time. But then I realized how old I am when I realized that everyone on our panel today all graduated years, in some cases, several years after me, several years after I even graduated law school. But Elizabeth is keeping me some close company, at least on that respect. So I'm a constitutional and commercial lawyer, litigator in Los Angeles at the Davis Wright Tremaine law firm. And if you're here, it's because our panel today, you're here to talk about some of the more resilient Columbia College and Columbia Engineering alums that we have. And we're here to learn a little bit about how their enterprises and endeavors have not only persevered through this most remarkable year we've all just had, year plus that we've all just had, but how they've changed and grown stronger as a result of it. My sense of doing Zooms now for far too long is the best way to handle these kinds of panels is to do them informally. And so rather than give a stilted introduction to everyone here, let me just briefly say we're joined by Elizabeth Kip-Giusti, Dominic Perkai, Jason Kang, and Ji-Yoon Han. And I'm going to throw it to each of them to introduce themselves. So Elizabeth, why don't you go ahead and go first. Tell us a little about yourself, what you do, and maybe why don't you tell us what your favorite class was when you were at Columbia?
I will definitely do that. And I am holding it down in the early 2010s graduation, Adam. So don't, you're not alone. So my name is Elizabeth Kip-Giusti. I am a Columbia College graduate, class of 2012. I am the chair emerita of the CAA Arts Access Committee, and I currently also serve on the CAA board. So I have not strayed too far from Columbia, even in my journeys. For my professional work, I am a major gift officer for the Public Theater, which is a very significant nonprofit theater based in New York. You may have heard of a couple of the shows we've done. Hamilton is the big one, but we certainly are all over the place. We are just gearing up for Shakespeare in the Park this summer at the Delacorte Theater, which maybe you experienced when you were an undergrad. So it has certainly been an interesting year for me. And I have definitely been reflecting. Adam, I hope you don't mind me sharing. So this was when we first were connected for this panel, I was like, Adam, I think we were in CC together, which you said we weren't, but I'm not so sure. I still think maybe you visited my class or something like that. But my CC class was probably up there amongst my favorite classes at Columbia. I had two rock star professors. My partner and I are both Columbia grads, and we have been going through our old annotated books together this whole year. So I'm gonna have to say CC. And Adam, we'll have to go through the memory logs to see if in fact you were in that class. I'm gonna kick it to Jason.
All righty. Hey everyone, my name is Jason Kang. Graduated from C's undergrad in 2016, studied biomedical engineering. I currently am the CEO and co-founder of Kinos, which is a venture-backed infection prevention company. In a nutshell, basically we colorize disinfectants so you can actually see where it's being applied, and the color will automatically fade away to show you when disinfection is done. And we've done work around the world with NGOs for humanitarian crises, and we've also done work for daily routine disinfection in hospitals. My favorite class, there's a couple. I mean, so I've always been not amazing at physics, and I kind of blame my dad. He was also not good at physics, so it kind of runs in the family. But mechanics with Jim Hone was like the first time when I really got it, so that felt really good. I'll kick it over to Dom.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. So Dominic Perkai here. So I graduated from Columbia College in 2018. I majored in political science And now I'm back for round two. I'm back at Columbia Business School now, pursuing my MBA with an anticipated graduation in 2023. Professionally, I was in the commercial real estate space as a brokerage professional for the last 3 years for a company called Avis & Young, where we primarily specialize on office leasing transactions, and in particular representing landlords across New York City and across the US as well. And I just recently transitioned to a new role as a client advisor at a late stage commercial real estate technology company called VTS. Which is really exciting. So new job, starting school as well. So a lot of transition during a crazy time, and happy to be here and discuss this with everyone else. And I guess my favorite class would probably also be CC with Charles Armstrong was my professor. And we had some really interesting discussions there. So I think that was probably that was the most fun I had, in that class, CC. So.
Awesome. All right, and Ji, throw it to you.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone. I'm Columbia College 2013. Professionally, I have been working in UX design and product management across mobility, AI, ML, and audio tech. And I returned to business school at Harvard Business School in 2020, and then the pandemic hit. So I came back to New York to be with family. And my family has a coffee business based in New York and New Jersey. And instead of going back to business school for my second year, I have been buckled down here and really helping the family business survive through COVID and make all the necessary pivots in order to stay afloat. So in terms of coffee is another area that I really am passionate about, in addition to user experience and tech. I'm a Q grader, which is equivalent to being a coffee sommelier in the world of coffee. I compete and judge in national and international coffee competitions, which is really interesting, exciting, and nerve-wracking. And my favorite class at Columbia, I would say also was CC and LitHub. And Dominic, I had Professor Charles Armstrong for 2 classes.
I saw your note. What a small world. I didn't know that he's been teaching at Columbia. He's been teaching at Columbia for how long now? He's been here for a little while, huh?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
He's a classic.
All right. Well, that's amazing. Not such a small world within the confines of Columbia College. Maybe, Gene, if you don't mind, I'm curious. You mentioned you had to make pivots with your family's business. What kind of pivots were you making? I'm curious to hear sort of how you guys evolved in the context of this awful environment for a person-to-person business like coffee.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we really doubled down on 3 things: online, community, and collaboration. So online meaning my family started the business in 2008 when I was a high school senior. And for 12 years, they've been retail brick and mortar operators. They knew nothing about online. I stepped in and started e-commerce for the family. So now we have a shop up on Shopify. We're going live on Amazon. So all of you can buy our coffee on Amazon Prime. Shameless plug here. And also connecting offline and online became really important. So if you ask me pre-COVID, what are your thoughts on Uber Eats and DoorDash? I would have told you the margins just don't work. We're not going to invest in this. But we figured out a way to streamline operations for these delivery platforms in a way that makes sense for our coffee business. So yeah, that became a very significant revenue channel. And then in terms of community and collaboration, I think those are sort of on the same pillar, where you really have to remember what community is that you're serving and are part of, and the power of collaborating with the partners that exist in your community.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting that you didn't formally use these platforms, but then figured out ways to make the margins work. Do you think you're going to stick with them once you go back to more normal operations?
Yes, yeah, because
Oh.
I've realized the power of using platforms like Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub as a marketing channel. So if you're thinking about it in terms of digital marketing, like if
Mm,
you're operating an e-commerce shop, the commissions you're paying to Uber Eats is actually the cost of acquisition at 20 to 30%. And that's okay if you are relying on volume and if you can make it work for you. And it also helps with small things like SEO and discoverability and tapping into an entirely new customer base. So yeah, we're figuring out ways to make it work for us beyond COVID.
it's wild. I mean, it seems like one of the stories you hear a lot is how people go into the pandemic and it not only changes the way they do business, but it improves the way that they do business. If you're fortunate enough to make it through and still be up on your feet, I know from law firms that's certainly the case. But Elizabeth, as a huge fan of all of the public theater's works, I mean, I can't imagine an industry that's been hit as hard as live performances. It's like the one thing you still can't really do. I mean, actually in New York, it looks like you can. I was watching the Knicks game the other day. People are out and about, but not as many people here in Staples Center. What have you guys done? How are you guys staying afloat? What's the state of things over at the public theater?
No, I appreciate this question, and I think it's it's interesting because the truth is like while functionally the mode of operation of a theater of a performing arts venue was fundamentally changed on March 12th, 2020 in New York. Um, Basically, the same structural shifts had to happen that happened, June, as you said, like on your end. So we really had to basically like rethink our modes of production, rethink who, and really reinvest in community and be really strategic about making sure that the decisions and staffing and execution was as efficient as possible. So I mean, I will say, I think candidly, when March rolled around, we had shows that were like basically ready to go. We had sets in our theaters, we were getting people booked, and it was like it all had to stop. And it took about a month to have us all reorganize and restructure our thinking. And then pretty quickly we realized we needed to start pivoting to digital models of production. So we very quickly we commissioned a new play called The Line, which was an oral history of frontline workers dealing with COVID in New York. It was a Zoom play, but it was also, exploring what oral history looked like in this moment, remote recording and engagement and interviews. We had another show that we did that we pivoted to a radio play with WNYC, which was a really incredible, fruitful partnership that basically meant that we were able to reach audience members far beyond the physical capacity of our theaters, which I'm hopeful will continue. I mean, all signs point to us continuing to do that in the future. And then basically really having to be my work as a fundraiser is to be as engaged as I possibly could be with the folks who keep us afloat in this time. So, no holds barred. It was like phone calls and really being thoughtful about who our partners are, who our community partners are, because we realized, I think, that there has been a historical reality of the cultural landscape in New York where it's a little bit of a a zero-sum game where it feels like everybody's in competition for attention and dollars and ticket sales. And that no longer can be the case. We're lucky to be a relatively large organization. And so it seems as though we're get through. We've had some really generous folks step up to the plate and say, we want to invest in your resiliency. And we want to invest in your resiliency because we want you to take other smaller organizations on the ride with you. So moving forward, one of the things we're really also excited about is being in partnership with smaller theater companies that may have lost their real estate, over the course of the pandemic, or may not have been able to, afford a full producing model. In partnership with us, might be able to do that in the future. So as much as it was genuinely like you can't even imagine, it was like the whole world stopped and everybody had to learn a whole new set of skills. I'm actually, not to do silver lining too much, it's been a hard year, but it has been really, I think, an important evolution for my organization to really think about how we can be the best stewards of our mission in the most expansive way possible.
Yeah. I mean, tremendous work by you and all your colleagues, and especially the work you were doing in the community. You just sort of on the other side of the ledger in a way. I mean, going from businesses that kind of get blindsided by a pandemic that keeps people apart. Jason, you run a company that literally disinfects surfaces. I mean, was that was the pandemic the sort of boon for, I mean, I don't mean to be, again, crass, but I mean, it seems like you were in the right place at the right time. How did the pandemic affect your operations as a business, and what kinds of applications have you guys found that were relevant to the last 12 months and the needs that people have had?
Yeah, I'd say it's actually been a really interesting year. There's been a lot of ups and been a lot of downs. So I think somewhat counterintuitively, again, not to be crass, but I think for the first time ever, like bleach is a sexy topic. Disinfection is like really important, and people care about it a lot more than they used to. Despite even knowing that COVID is primarily transmitted through aerosolization or through respiratory, people still really want to see that surfaces are clean now. I would say that among our peers in the infection prevention startup community, what we've generally found is that places where you already had sort of a foothold, or people were using it and were familiar with the product, people started using a lot more. But in terms of trying to get new accounts or new users in the middle of an emergency, in the middle of a crisis, is really, really difficult. People tend to just turn towards things that they're really comfortable with, and no one wants to spend the additional time to learn something new, even if it's a really small change in protocol. They just do not have the bandwidth whatsoever. Also within healthcare, a lot of hospitals suffered financially. Despite the massive volumes of patients coming in with COVID, most of the revenue of hospitals comes from elective procedures, which basically were not it was basically shut off the entire outbreak, and it's starting to come back now. But we know hospitals that have lost literally billions of dollars, and so to have to pitch to a hospital and say, hey, we have this innovation that we want you to give us money for, it's a little bit difficult in terms of timing and where they're financially. So, there have actually been a lot of challenges despite sort of being in the right place in the right time. So to kind of address that, we did a lot of, I wouldn't necessarily say pivots, but we definitely explored a lot of new spaces. So during the onset of the outbreak, when there's that huge hand sanitizer shortage, we were able to make tens of thousands of units and help supply it to local community centers and hospitals. And that felt like a good use of our time. And we also looked at other spaces outside of healthcare. So I think one of the things I was really impressed about with New York City in particular is that the transit authorities actually held an innovation competition to look for ways to keep ridership safe. So we were actually one of the finalists in the COVID-19 response challenge. And we partnered with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and actually ran a pilot with them and found a 63% improvement in disinfection quality when using our product. And, we hadn't ever really considered transit as kind of like the next step for us, but now it seems super relevant. We've also done some work now exploring partnerships with consumer companies, kind of going back to that theme before of consumers really want that sort of peace of mind and reassurance. When they, sit in the subway or eat out at a dining table, they just kind of want to, we have a really good platform with visible disinfection you can see. So yeah, it's definitely opened up a lot of kind of interesting, exciting opportunities for us, but it's definitely also been a super challenging year for our company.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's outstanding that you were able to find opportunities to take your capabilities and plug them into helping the community. That's something that I'm hearing from each of you. And Dom, I was actually going to ask you this question, Dominic. I know outside of your work in commercial real estate, you serve on the board of, I think, a housing organization, Help USA. I mean, between your roles in commercial real estate and your nonprofit work, I mean, what have you observed, and what have been the sorts of interventions that have worked best to sort of help people get through this tough time? And how have you managed to split your time between nonprofit work and working for your company and now starting business?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question, Adam. It's been a lot. As you guys all know, and I'm sure everybody's, staying up with what's going on with COVID-19 and, the office realm, which is the particular asset that I was working in. The office realm took a huge hit, and New York City, more than any other business district out there, got slammed, right, from an office market perspective. So I mean, leasing velocity completely took a nosedive. And that's what initially got me to kind of rethink and reassess, opportunities moving forward. And that's why I kind of wanted to pivot to the technology side. And that's what ultimately led to me making the transition to VTS. On the Help USA front, though, it's been really difficult, right? Because I'm kind of the chair of an associate board for Help USA, which is one of the largest providers of low-income and homeless shelters in New York. And we operate across 4 other states as well: Maryland, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. But due to COVID-19, it's brought about significant hardship, and in particular here in New York City, because what ended up happening with a lot of our shelters, we had to de-densify the shelters. So we ended up having to actually put some of our homeless clients out, right? Relocate them. We did our best to relocate as many as we could into other shelters. And some actually we had no choice, but we had to push them out, right, for the de-densification. And then with our homeless residents that actually had children and that have families, what we were experiencing was, now because school was actually being taken in the digital forum, a lot of these kids did not have electronics. So we had a shortage of electronics, right? And then we had to de-densify shelters. So we were dealing with a lot of craziness. And then from a junior board perspective, it was about keeping everyone involved, right? And still finding ways to have a net positive impact on the community. And that was really difficult in the digital forum too, because people, there's so many events, right? You've seen zillions of events online, right, through Zoom. And that's what we were doing at first. And it's just difficult keeping everyone dialed in and participating and everyone kind of pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I see some questions are starting to filter into the Q&A. I want to get there in a couple minutes, but before we do, I want to just see if I could steal some more of your time myself real quick. I'm curious for each of you, if there was one thing you'd tell yourself in February of 2020, how this would all go, or how to prepare for the next 15 months, what would you say, going back and talking to your former selves?
Should I start then, Adam?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I think for me, COVID-19, it's very serious, and there are a lot of negative things, a lot of terrible things that came about because of COVID-19. But I did see a silver lining with me personally, right? And I was essentially in this mode where I was just grinding every day, super early in the morning, late at night, day in and day out. And I wasn't really taking a step back and giving myself time to kind of see the big picture. So I guess the one thing I'll tell myself is just, pre-COVID-19, I would say just relax, take some of that time away, spend that time with your family and your loved ones, and recalibrate and take stock in yourself, what you're doing professionally and your relationships, and start mapping things out longer term, because I think it's difficult when you're in a daily grind on a regular basis. You always have things on your to-do list. You're always working really hard at what you're doing, right? Your craft, whether it's, and even volunteering, right? And the other things that we have going on in our lives, family and whatnot. It's important to take care of yourself too. So that's one thing I'd probably tell myself.
It's interesting. While I buy some of you some time to come up with your own responses. I remember it lit hum when you read the Decameron, right? Which is, and for those of you who read it as well, maybe you remember this. But in my year, we read the Decameron. And the Decameron was a series of stories written during the bubonic plague in the 13th or 14th century. And it was so interesting to see how that civilization, that Western European civilization, came out of its own experience with plague and the sorts of values that the society held and the kinds of things that people chose to do with their mortality and their time on Earth shifted, and the priorities changed and the values changed. And I don't know if it's because we're doing a Columbia panel or what, but Dominic, your answer made me think of that. And I agree. I think that to a great extent, what's come from COVID-19 is a massive reevaluation of priorities, personally and professionally.
Yeah, I'm going to build on that. You know, I think when you first said the Decameron, I thought you were going to say, you know, at least amongst the artist communities I'm part of, everybody had the first impulse of, well, King Lear was written during the plague in England, so write your King Lear during this pandemic, which, you know, no pressure. That's a pretty important historical play, you know. And I think for me, I think it's really well said, which is that this year has professionally and personally been a moment of reflection and gratitude. It's had the other side of the coin has been fear and loss and anxiety about what's to come. And I think to myself, I would say, you know, take each day, do the best you can, go to sleep at night and get up the next day. And I think that like truly is a radical reevaluation, especially for myself as somebody who has always been a very like fast track person. And, you know, I think there's a reason why we are all kind of nodding at this. That tends to be the Columbia mindset is, you know, how do I do the best version of the time that I've got in the place that I've got? How do I bring my best self? And that still holds true for me. But, you know, quite candidly, I had family members who were sick with COVID and we really didn't know what was going to come of that. And you know, that has for me reaffirmed the importance of being close to my family. You know, I think one of the things, Adam, that I have been really thinking about, especially circling back to the Decameron, is how will our culture, Western culture at least, or globally, shift moving forward? And I think, quite honestly, we may not see some of the impact of this year until a year or 2 or 5, you know, like maybe shifting geographically, the future of remote work, being really intentional about, you know, inclusiveness and equity in cultural programming. I mean, I think all of these things, the seeds have been planted this year. But I think for myself, I'm really trying to say, you know, who knew we'd be here a year ago? Who knows where we'll be a year from now? And trying to just like slow down a little bit is something I'm going to try to hold on to now that things, at least in New York, start to really feel like they're coming back online. Or maybe offline, so to speak.
Right. Jason, what do you wish you knew?
Yeah. I guess what I just tell myself is, I think, you know, I'm definitely like my own harshest critic. And I think that with being in infection prevention during a pandemic, it definitely felt like there was a lot of pressure to, you know, execute, perform, scale. And, you know, obviously there's a lot of challenges too. And you can't always hit the idealized perfect version of what you have in your head. So rather than just being, you know, critical of yourself, just be prouder of the things that we did get done that did make positive impacts. So yeah, that's probably what I would have told myself back then.
Jean.
Yeah, last but not least, I think this one's really personal to me. So having come out of my first year of business school where people are really career driven and very ambitious, I think I didn't embrace the fact that I was helping my family's small business survive through COVID enough. And in retrospect, from the very get-go, I could have been given myself more credit for that. So now, a year later, I would tell myself back in March 2020, you should be proud of the fact that you're able to help your family's business survive and help the business pivot. Yeah, from a personal, that's a very personal realization. And then from a more business, putting on my business cap on, I think this relates back to user experience and product design, but the importance of meeting your customers where they're at, and that's always changing and evolving. And I think that applies to every one of the panelists here today, whether it be theater or Jason's business or and Dom's space. People that we're selling our products to and serving, their needs and wants and desires are always going to be changing and evolving. So we have to not try to enforce what we think they want, but really try to understand what it is that they need and find them where they're at, whether it be, I don't know, it could be like a virtual coffee class or a virtual performance in Elizabeth's case. And Jason, what you said resonated with me earlier about even though you were in the right space at the right time, it was hard to find new clients and customers because people are stuck in their ways of doing things, and you have to really understand where their pain points are and how to make your product relevant. So I think that's a business realization.
I'm interested in one of the reflections you had about your personal experience. Did you expect to be going into taking over or helping to guide your family's business at this point last year? Was this something that just happened because of the pandemic?
So I have always been involved in the family business since I was in high school, but I never was at the forefront in this capacity. And to your question, Adam, no, I did not expect this. So.
And it sounds like you plan to at least stay involved now more than you had.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful to be able to.
That's wild. Well, with the remaining time that we have, I thought maybe we could start bringing in some questions from the audience. And I see we've got one, and I know Sarah's going to send us some more. By the way, let me pause for a moment, make sure that we acknowledge the fantastic work by Columbia College, Young Alumni Association, Columbia Engineering, Young Alumni. These are folks, and we're joined on the call by Sarah Gowrie and I think it's Nicole. Nicole, we just met earlier, Asarita, who's our excellent programming assistant, put together all these events that many of you I know have been attending last week and this week. And, you know, a reunion is tough enough to plan as it is, even harder under these circumstances. So thank you all for putting this together and for allowing me to get to meet some of these folks who I hadn't met before. But we're getting some questions coming in. I see that we have one for Jason. The question is, Jason, can you talk about your current products for hospitals and doctors' offices? Are you doing any trials with hospitals currently?
Yeah, we are. So we actually just launched our hospital version of our product beginning of this year, so about 5 months ago. There's a video on our website, but basically it's sort of like a printer and ink cartridge concept. You put our hardware on top of your existing, let's just call it like a Clorox canister of wipes. And then as the wipes go through our lid device, they'll get printed on with our color technologies. And then when you wipe the surface, it leaves behind this bright blue trace, so you can actually see where you've covered, and then it'll automatically disappear after about 2 to 3 minutes. And yeah, we are actually in a couple of hospitals now in Chicago, Baltimore, Texas, California, just, you know, wherever people will take us, we're all over the place, even in Canada now too. But it's still relatively, I'd say, early stages of commercialization, but definitely gaining some traction now, which is very exciting for the business.
That's awesome to hear. And our next question is for each of you. The question is, how's your time at Columbia helped you over the past year, either personally or professionally? And that can include both what you learned when you were at Columbia, your experiences, the growth you took from school, but also the network and your classmates and peers and so on. So how has Columbia played in each of your pandemic recovery victory stories?
I'll certainly go. I mean, I feel like this has been part of my trajectory of being involved with the CAA in a number of ways. Both the Arts Access Committee and the board has been really important pre-COVID and during COVID. I mean, it has been a critical part of the my career trajectory. It's been a critical part of how I've understood myself in relation to mentors and found mentors, and really, built confidence to be able to identify a career path. I'm a fundraiser for a nonprofit theater. Nobody is 12 years old and is like, one day I want to raise money for a nonprofit arts organization. You really have to find your way through that. And especially this year, I feel like for me, a big part of my job is connecting people, connecting donors to the work, connecting artists to other artists. And I have to say very honestly, that Columbia connection, I cannot be understated how meaningful it is as a door opener. I think about, Jason, you were saying this year was very difficult to find new consumers. Similarly, it was very challenging this year to build new donor relationships. Never having met somebody in person, asking them to support a project or an organization, it's very challenging. Normally I like to meet with somebody face to face and have a conversation and build a relationship over a long time. And one of the things that I think has been really meaningful to me, and I genuinely mean this, is if and when I share that we have a Columbia connection, or a donor and I have a Columbia connection, there's a shorthand. We understand we are coming from a same educational background. We can swap favorite professors. We can talk about our time on campus, where we lived, and it's pretty invaluable, I have to say. And it's meaningful too, because what that really means to me is that the Columbia community is everywhere. There is validity in the statement of, build, belong, bond, that we belonged to each other. So I have to say, I feel like I take many things from my Columbia experience, but that Columbia network, in a time where expanding what community means and relationships, was just, I don't know that I could have gotten through this time without it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add that I changed jobs twice during the pandemic. I left my prior firm to go work on one of the presidential campaigns, and subsequently rejoined a different law firm. And both times, just random Columbia connections were sort of the fortuitous connections that I had that enabled me to sort of navigate those situations, which would have been more difficult had I not had them. And I think that it's not just the fact that folks are alumni. It seems to be the fact that when you meet someone who's a Columbian, you understand that there's sort of a shared background of not training, but sort of appreciation for the way of thinking, and a kind of thoughtful and humane type of person. And it was really comforting for me to sort of going to law firm, which is not the most humane type of employment. Finding folks who really seem to have chosen, my current firm, for example, on the basis of the fact that it was the kind of place where you could have fullness in your life and excellence in your practice. And, I'm consistently blown away by how much more impressive every Columbia alum, including each of you, is than I could ever hope to be. And I'm so really grateful, and that's why I give back to the university community and host panels like this and get to meet each of you. I have another question we could circulate, and then folks can answer this one or the one before as well. But there's a question that says, what do each of you see as the biggest challenge for your industry in a post-pandemic world? So I'll throw that one out there as well and see if folks have thoughts on that. I want to finish up the Columbia connection question as well.
You know, I just wanted to touch on the Columbia connection one real quickly, Adam, and say I am immensely grateful for having the opportunity to attend Columbia College, right? And now having the opportunity to attend Columbia Business School. The institution is unbelievable. And the connections that I've made from actually Columbia undergrad, there are some mentors that I have in my industry in commercial real estate that I am extremely close with that have directly helped me over the last 3+ years that I would never have. And I would never even know these people if I didn't go through the same thing that they went through, and that is Columbia College. So the connections are so important. I think that's a huge part outside of the curriculum, right? And the rigor of the curriculum. I feel like that's probably the most important piece of it all, right? Of the undergrad experience really is, the network, but you don't quite realize that, or sometimes I should say, students don't quite realize that until they graduate. And then, I feel like it kind of comes to, it comes to bear later on, but.
Yeah, I might add on to that too. I don't think Columbia directly sort of was super involved during the pandemic itself. But I mean, when we first started, we got funding, we got our first investor through Columbia Connection, and no, definitely super grateful to Columbia there. But I would actually say that during the pandemic, where I sort of had the most gratitude for Columbia was just like the friends I made during undergrad. I still live in Manhattan right now, and a lot of my closest friends also live in Manhattan, and we were part of sort of like the same small quarantine bubble, and kind of kept each other sane during this past difficult year. And yeah, like I think the thing that I cherish the most from my time at Columbia was just the really close friendships I made.
I think for me, I learned to listen really attentively and actively. And I didn't realize that I was a good listener until I went to business school, where everyone just wants to shout out over each other. So I think it may have been like the particular combination of classes I took and the amazing professors I had, but I really learned to become a good listener, and consequently, I'm able to ask good questions and really empathize. So I attribute that largely to Columbia and my education there.
And then to the next question, what do you each see as the biggest challenge for your industry, your careers as you're changing industries in the world that comes after this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm qualified to speak for my entire industry at all, but
Really, no, I mean,
yeah, but I don't know. I guess like it's kind of touching upon what I was talking about earlier. I definitely do see there being a recovery period for so many hospitals, and I think for a lot of healthcare entrepreneurs out there, trying to add any sort of new budget line item to a hospital right now is going to be much harder than it used to be. And even back then, it was already like insanely hard. But I also think that for people in infection prevention, it definitely does seem like there's more awareness now, and people definitely appreciate it more and realize it's not as simple as just slapping some, spraying a surface and walking away. There's actually a lot of technique, and there's a process behind it to effectively kill the pathogens. And yeah, I mean, we still have our work cut out for us, but definitely also encouraged that people seem to be paying more attention to prevention. I think for a long time, especially in the healthcare space, we've always been sort of dominated by medical devices, drugs, just kind of like treatments. It's much easier to measure an outcome. If you give someone a drug and they're cured, chalk it up to a victory, and you can actually count that. But in terms of preventing things, if you did your job, nothing happens, and it's a little bit more difficult to quantify. But I think now there's kind of this shift in healthcare towards, prevention actually it takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. So yeah.
guess I can speak real quickly on the commercial real estate landscape. I think the most challenging thing, and I truly believe this, and everyone has their own opinions on it, right? And like Jason said, it's tough to have one person kind of speak on behalf of an entire industry, but I really think COVID has forced employers to accept the fact that they're not going to be able to keep their employees chained to their desk, right, at the office. And how viable is the office on a full-time regular basis like it was pre-COVID-19? And I think the answer to that question is not nearly as viable as it was previously. So what's going to happen with a lot of the office space that's not being utilized, right? You have some companies that are doubling down, right? You have a Facebook that leased, several million square feet in New York City, Amazon, Apple, TikTok, right? All with humongous leases right in Manhattan. These are technology companies that are doubling down, and what they're offering, the experience that they're offering to their employees, it's just that. It's an experience. It's not a traditional law firm or a financial firm that has this more traditional setup. It's truly an experience, and they're attracting major talent to come in, and people have fun. They want to come into work. But I feel like the most difficult thing is just, what are we going to do with all of this space that is designed as of right now, that's fit out for office, that will most likely not need to be used again at this capacity?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, I'm going to dovetail with that. And also, Jiyun, I think like your point about realizing that you're a good listener, I feel like the act and skill of listening is always undervalued, but especially this year when there has just been such a like overstimulation of just like noise and output and like relevance. I have been really interested to think about how to like professionally listen better. And from a cultural organization perspective, especially based in New York, one of the things that I think we're really going to have to grapple with is twofold. What do we do as a physically based institution moving forward, especially in a city that is now like reinventing or re-understanding the concept of belonging to a city and to spaces and to, what even like does New York City look like, moving forward? I think that's a big question mark, and one that I specifically think is really important because the public, as lots of arts organizations are, is very place-based. And so we have to do a very good job of really being proactive in the activation of physical spaces, and also be really thoughtful about how to listen for this now expanded audience of engagement that we've built globally over this past year, how to serve both of those interests and be able to both be hyper place reflective and make sure that we're continuing to listen to the people who have said, listen, I'm a disabled person. I could never get to see something in your theater. I want you to continue to be innovative in your production models. I want you to continue to be integrating technology and recording and, have this be part of your plan for what the future of theater looks like moving forward. So I think there's a tension there, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to kind of meet both and rise to that challenge.
And for me, that was so beautifully put, Elizabeth. I think the concept of reimagining the place and how to shape this place in a different way than we knew it before definitely applies to retail, brick and mortar. So retail is not dead; it's just evolving, and there's going to be a lot of what I'm trying to do is to marry offline and online, that they're one seamless experience for coffee drinkers and our customers. So I'm super excited to do things that have been undone by connecting the online and offline spaces.
Thank you each. That was, both incredibly insightful, also very interesting and very, Elizabeth, I'm very interested as well in what the future of New York City looks like, not as a New Yorker, but as someone who always feels like New York is a part of me. And for those of you listening, if you're not in New York, maybe you feel the same way because of your time at Columbia. You know, folks, I think that we're just about at time, and I know that we have some other events that start at 8. So in the interest of letting folks get ready to jump to those other events, I thought that maybe this might be a good opportunity to thank our panelists. Thank you, Ji-Yoon. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you again to the Columbia College Young Alumni. Thank you again to Columbia College, or the Columbia Engineering Young Alumni Group as well for organizing this. We hope that we can get together in person for this. In my case, hopefully we'll be back for my 15th reunion. We'll be able to do it in person. We were talking about before, and for each of you, Elizabeth, you've got your 10-year next year. Hopefully we'll be able to get up on campus and get to see some folks in person. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for your support of Columbia, and have a great rest of your evening.